Lots of threats coming from the United States to Iran, and there's a direct connection made by the White House between what's going on in Yemen and in Iran itself. Now, previous to today's news, Trump had said basically, we're going to just go on a sustained bombing campaign to teach the Houthis that they can't get away with this, with blocking the Red Sea shipping. So we've been having this sustained air campaign. But then this news from the CNN just hours ago is suggesting that far from being cowed by U.S. airstrikes, the Yemen's Houthis may be relishing them. Does this surprise you at all?
No, the Houthis have held up for years of a campaign against them by the Saudi Arabias, which eventually seemed to finish off as a score draw. And they seem to be well armed, as far as I can see, and with some quite dangerous or some quite effective weapons. And what we've been watching in the Red Sea is that it's not easy, even for a first-rate military power such as America, with the support of some European forces, to actually prevent the Houthis actually closing down the Red Sea. Effectively, they've closed down the Red Sea and use those weapons very effectively. I mean, as a naval aviator, I'm of course interested in how air power is deployed. But actually, I think we're seeing amongst the Houthis that there is a limit to the utility of air power. I mean, it's always been the case in a way. And I look across to Iran and think about the use of air power in Iran. I mean, ultimately, if you want to do something in a country, then you do it with people on the ground, and not ships offshore or aircraft above. So that's the only way which you can achieve real change.
Well, now, in fact, and on that regard, also CNN is reporting, literally, I just saw it right before we came on the air here, that apparently the White House is signaling that they're ready to do some things on the ground in Yemen, sending in some American special forces to work with the Yemen government that is recognized by the UN, separate from the Houthis in there. There's been a simmering civil war, as you mentioned, since I think 2015 at least. So they're trying to think about maybe we go in there and do something on the ground. Does that have a chance of success?
My guess is not, but I think what they're talking about is sort of reinforcing the existing regime. I think is what they're saying. I haven't seen the article.
Yeah,
but again, I think the problem here is that the Houthis are doing this because of the events that are playing out in Gaza. They've been absolutely clear. As soon as the ceasefire was in place, they stopped. As soon as the ceasefire broke down, they started again. And that's the reason they're doing it. I think you can have quite a lot of effect by using air power and special forces together. We saw that in Afghanistan in 2003. It was a terrific use in many ways of air power with special forces. However, what that analysis in 2003 missed was that we were jumping into the middle of what already was a civil war between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance.
Right.
And so bringing overwhelming American air power on the side of the Northern Alliance, of course they deposed the Taliban. I think without understanding really the proper context, the geographic and geopolitical context within Yemen, I'd be super cautious about this, because I'm not sure we haven't achieved much so far, indeed, other than use lots and lots of expensive missiles to shoot down quite a few cheap drones, which isn't a good calculation.
Right.
But without doing that proper analysis and really understanding the detail of what's going on, again, I'm sure you and I both, with our experience in Afghanistan, I realized that we were very, very poor at understanding the geopolitical context and even the tribal context. It took me, I was sitting with a naval captain, fun enough, in ISAF headquarters in Afghanistan, we were sitting around a chart of Afghanistan, and on the one hand we had all the military incidents, on the other hand we also had the patchwork of the Pashtun tribes, and they were completely concurrent. And we suddenly looked at each other and said, this isn't an Afghan insurgency, it's a Pashtun insurgency. And so it was. But you've got to have that level of understanding of the local people and the local culture before you should throw any sort of weapons at it, if you think you're going to do anything other than waste munitions and probably make yourself look even worse on the world stage because of the failure that follows.
Yeah, and I'm seeing play out here a very, very similar dynamic to what I witnessed firsthand in Afghanistan, in that we had this big surge of forces going there under Obama, actually two separate surges in 2009, 2010, to where we said, hey, there's a problem militarily, so we'll go in even bigger. And again, we were working with the Afghan security forces, with all of our combat power to quell the Taliban. And I'll never forget that I can't remember the exact numbers right now, but it was somewhere around 15 or 20,000 alleged Taliban members at the beginning of the surge. And then after we ended the surge and left, it ended up being around 75,000. So however many we killed in all that time, all it did was draw like a magnet more people to come in. And it appears that same dynamic is playing out right now in Yemen.
Yeah. I remember well when we were prepping to sort of increase the force as NATO took over in Afghanistan in 2006, I think it was. And we were prepping to increase it, and we put quite a large British force into the Helmand province. And at the time we went in, there was an American PRT, about 150 people. Sorry, provincial reconstruction team, about 150 people. And it was pretty quiet. And anyway, put 4,500 British troops in. It got very, very busy and noisy. And the reason was, I'm sure, was they said, our intelligence said there's only about 200 to 400 Taliban. And afterwards, people say, we obviously got that wrong. Well, I think they probably didn't get it wrong. I think what happens is by putting people in, large military forces in, the people rose up against us. You know, and surprise, surprise. I mean, the Afghans have got a habit of doing that and doing it very well. I mean, the British should know this more than anybody. I think we've had two wars in the century before last where at best it was a score draw, but we worked out that it wasn't a good thing to do. And it feels very, very similar in the in Yemen, although I don't know that campaign or the tribal makeup nearly as well. But you've got to have a deeply, really good understanding of that. As I look back at that, and it's a bit like, it might well be the same really with Yemen, was that what we were trying to do in Afghanistan, Danny, was to solve a security problem by changing a nation's culture. We're trying to fast forward them into the 21st century with lots of development aid. And best of luck with that. My wife's Zimbabwean, and she was brought up in Zimbabwe, which was one of the British colonies, then transferred to its own rule. And when as Robert Mugabe came in, then after that, we've seen essentially a reversion to African culture. And surprise, surprise, I think when we get into places like this and assume that we can solve problems by military force and development aid and telling people how to run their countries, I think that not only is it hubristic and arrogant, it also doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just ineffective.
We've got
I fear that we're about to even get deeper into that problem with Iran, the supporter of the Houthis. Like I said a minute ago, had President Trump and Netanyahu going to meet together today. Netanyahu, about a month ago, said that with Trump's help, he is ready to, quote, finish off the Iranians and get that problem solved once and for all. And then, of course, you've had Trump just a number of days or about a week ago say that either the Iranians will make a deal to Trump's satisfaction, or there will be bombing, et cetera. And now then here they're meeting today. We don't know what they're going to say, but it just doesn't seem like it's got a good feel that we're going to say, you know what, we'll just negotiate this away. We'll just take the military off the board. What is your best guess of what you think may come out of this meeting?
I'm not sure. I would hope that it's a negotiated solution. In fact, I fervently hope that it's a negotiated solution. It's a pity that the JPCOA was cancelled all those years back because it was working and it had Russia on board as well. But the fear is that if it's a military solution, the first thing is that without putting troops on the ground, the Americans will not want to put troops on the ground in Iran, nor can the Israelis. But without putting troops on the ground, you're using strategic bombardment to achieve your aims. I have a strong suspicion that the way that the Iranians will respond to this is by strategic bombardment of Israel. And the difference is that Iran is a very large country and Israel is a very small country. So Israel's a very easy target. And we saw some pretty sophisticated responses from Iran against Israel. And if you recall, I think I was listening to Alistair Cook about 9 months ago, where the Israelis kicked off what was going to be a bombing attack against Iran and then stopped because they realized that they didn't understand, no doubt, the signatures of the radars they were receiving and the air defense systems that they're up against. So they didn't actually push through with that. What I could imagine happening would be not only strategic bombardment of Israel, doing a lot of damage to Israel, but I could imagine as well that others in the Middle East, other Arab states in the Middle East, starting perhaps with Turkey, saying that, okay, well, this is perhaps a time to stop this for good in Israel and actually be more aggressive with Israel. But Turkey, I think, already putting military forces into Syria. And I could imagine the Egyptians as well, less likely the Egyptians. But if you've got an Israel which has, through the irrational acts of its leader, been doing things which actually weaken it, then I could imagine that it make Israel's situation much weaker rather than stronger. And I would hope that the AIPAC lobby are thinking about that as well. So it did make me wonder that one of the reasons why Netanyahu might have got 17% as opposed to 10% was that actually the Americans are starting to wonder whether or not he is the right leader for Israel and whether they do want to keep backing him or whether they might want somebody more moderate in there. So I don't know. That's just sort of me putting two and two together and making 17 perhaps, but it's just thinking.
Well, we'll certainly see how that works out there. And of course, one of my primary concerns about the military solution, so-called, is that there are 50,000 American troops scattered throughout the Middle East, many of them on small bases in Syria, which don't have strategic air defense capacity, only tactical stuff, which would be absolutely vulnerable to anything that Iran would choose to do. And their IRGC commander has outright threatened that they would do that in the event of a conflict with the United States. So there's everything to lose and every reason to go after diplomacy, and I certainly hope that's what they do.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you, Daniel. I think we've got little to gain in this and a lot to lose. You know, we know that Russia are supportive of Iran, not just because of their relationship, but also because Russia has a trade route which runs from Russia down into the Indian Ocean. So Russia is supportive of Iran. And so it seems now quite a few of the other Middle Eastern nations who did not used to be. I mean, Iran, of course, is a Shia, is the leading Shia state in the Middle East, and one of Saudi Arabia or Turkey or Egypt, depending on who you listen to, is the leading Sunni. But whilst in the past that the Saudi Arabians and the Iranians were very, very suspicious of each other, they do seem to be closer now as a result of these actions. It's almost impossible, really, to drive them together. But I'm afraid Netanyahu seems to have done it.